We're going to dive into our player, team, and coach of the week from this past week. We're going to talk playoff picture. We've got the playoff bracket pulled up here for everyone to see. And then we're going to go conference by conference for the Power Four and name our winner and loser from each conference. So I'll get things started on the team, player, coach front. I'm going to go with Duke as the team of the week, winning the ACC, going in at 7-5 to the championship game, destroying the hopes of Virginia getting into the playoffs, and really creating some chaos and leading to Notre Dame being left out of the college football playoff. So, shout out for Duke, your ACC champions, and you're going to be playing in some random bowl game somewhere. I don't even know which one it is. Um, my player of the week is Wayne Knight, the running back from JMU. 12 carries, 212 yards, and a touchdown. And for my coach of the week, I'm taking a coach who did not coach a game this past week, and that's Lane Kiffin. Held LSU's recruiting class together last week, allowed his assistants to go and coach Ole Miss in a playoff game that's upcoming, and retained Blake Baker. Got him to turn down some head coaching jobs to stay put as the defensive coordinator at LSU. So huge shout out to Lane Kiffin this week. So, Kevin, who do you have for team player and coach of the week?
Yeah, so again, I'm going to go Indiana. I loved them going into that game last week, and I just love the way that they competed and played. Just really old school physicality, and just they just execute so well. So Indiana is my team of the week. Kurt Signetti is my coach of the week. Probably should have been coach of the week more than I think it's the first time I've picked him, but obviously he earned it this week. And I'm going to stay right there with Indiana, and I'm going to go Elijah Hardy, one of their linebackers, number 21, had a great game, 10 tackles, 6 solos, 1 sack, and 1.5 tackles for a loss. To me, you have to pick a player. If you're going to pick player of the week, you have to go with a guy from Indiana and their defense, the way that they were able to control Ohio State's offense. And Hardy was the big guy there with them. So that's where I'm going with. Sweets, what about you, player team week?
My team of the week is the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia faced Alabama in a rematch of a October tilt where Alabama came out the winner. I believe all three of us picked Georgia to win this game. I thought they'd win handily, and they did. Just came out and basically bullied Alabama. Beat them 28-7, and it could have been a shutout just as easy as Bama got that one cheap touchdown. Georgia just dominated on all fronts, which leads me to my coach of the week, which is actually defensive coordinator Glenn Schumann for the Georgia Bulldogs. His defense held Alabama to 209 total yards, -3 on the ground. Held Simpson to under 50% on his passing, 19 for 39 with one touchdown and one pick. And it was just a show-stopping performance. If Georgia plays like this, they're the player of the week. I'm going to get to the Georgia defense, and I was just going to finish with this. If Georgia's defense plays like they did Saturday for the playoffs, uh, Georgia's going to be really really tough to beat. That defense was on tilt on Saturday. They looked good. Stockton's consistent. He's controlling the game, but that defense was impressive on Saturday. Where does that take us, DMAC?
Yeah, let's talk playoff bracket and give some early predictions on the game. So I know you guys covered this a little bit last night. So if you're listening tonight, go back and catch last night's episode too. But what do you guys think the playoff committee got right here? What do you think they got wrong? Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Well, so I'll go with what they got right first, and that's the obvious that Indiana should be one. So that's the obvious one. Um, to me, what they got wrong was A&M should be higher. I think that's the first thing they got wrong. Second thing to me they got wrong, and this could arguably be first, is Georgia should be 2. So I think those are the 2 that they absolutely got wrong. And I would say I think Indiana, or excuse me, not Indiana. I think Notre Dame should probably be in, and whether you take Miami or Alabama out. Last night we were talking about it, and I felt like really the team that should have fallen out was Alabama, just because the way in the 2 of the last 4 games that they played, they were really bad offensively. And they've not been a dominant defense. They're good defense. So I just didn't feel like the way that they finished the season, losing at home to Oklahoma, where I didn't think they played that well, and then really getting it handed to them by Georgia. I thought Bama should have been out of it. So, and then one other thing to me within this, the whole bracket thing. If you look at the brackets, and to me this is where I think they got it wrong. It's the worst committee that we've had in any of this, where you're talking the 4-team, the 12-team, whatever playoff college. This has been the worst. To me, it's very obvious that they went for SEC Big Ten matchups, the way that they set these games up. We covered it last night, but you got Ohio State, who has 2 potential SEC matchups, the way this thing lays out. And then Ole Miss and the way that it lays out, with them, and Georgia, potentially playing Ohio State, A&M playing Ohio State, Indiana playing either Bama or Oklahoma. So that would be my thoughts on it. I think again, I guess I go back. I think the only thing they probably did get right is Indiana number 1, and maybe Tech 4. I guess that's right. You could argue the rest of it up and down, in my opinion. Sweets, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, leave it to the NCAA to screw something up, and then they did so epically with this playoff thing. I was Indiana's the best team in the country. They beat Ohio State, who everybody thought was the best team in the country. So that's really hard to screw that up, almost impossible. And fortunately, they didn't. However, with the rest of it, they screwed up big time. First of all, with Notre Dame, I was a proponent of them not making the playoff as it stands. Do I think they're one of the top 12 teams in the country? I do. But with the way things are set up now, I just don't think that they had that big impressive win over anybody that got them in. Whereas Alabama had that big win against Georgia, so their biggest win. Notre Dame's fans are arguing from a we had 2 really close losses, and when you're arguing that you had good losses, then you really don't have much of an argument, in my opinion. But I think the committee screwed up by allowing 2 Group of 5 teams in. I hope to be proven wrong in the playoff games, but I can't picture either of those teams doing much against the teams they're playing with. Perhaps Tulane, Ole Miss, with the coaching change and stuff there, that could have an effect on that. But I think Oregon's going to absolutely crush James Madison. I wish that I wish that they had went about it differently. And the one thing where the committee screwed up the worst was not putting Miami ahead of Notre Dame because of the head-to-head 4 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago. Waiting until the last moment to do it made them, it put egg on their faces. If they had done it from the beginning, Notre Dame couldn't have complained as much because, they would have known they'd lost the head-to-head and Miami had been ranked ahead of them all that time. So, like I said, if the NCAA can screw something up, they'll find a way to do it, and they blew it again with this one. DMAC?
Yeah, I'm with you guys. Indiana deserves to be number 1. So, I feel like they got number 1 right, and that may be about it in this playoff bracket. I think Georgia should be 2. I'm happy with Tech at 4. But yeah, I honestly think Texas A&M probably shouldn't have dropped past 5. With their only loss. So that's a big difference playing James Madison or Miami in a playoff game. That's one game you're going to be a 20-point favorite. The other, I think A&M opened up at like 3.5, 4.5. So you're talking about a 2-score difference. You've got two matchups that are rematches in the first round of the playoff, and then you're likely going to have another rematch in the second round if Ole Miss beats Tulane. So I do wish that if the committee, they had to be thinking, as Alabama's getting dominated, well, how are we going to decide on Notre Dame and Miami? I think that it's pretty simple with how they had laid it out the last 4 weeks. Is I think Miami's deserving to be in, but with how they laid out the rankings, Notre Dame should be in that 10 seed with the data we had the month leading up to that to this unveiling of the playoff bracket. So, and yeah, absolutely insane to have two group of 6 teams in or group of 5 teams. Um, yeah, there are some good games. I like that Alabama Oklahoma matchup personally again, and I actually love the Texas A&M Miami game. That's going to be, in my opinion, the most exciting round one game to watch. Two of them are not going to be great games. Bama, Oklahoma will be good, but Texas A&M and Miami is going to be a phenomenal game to watch. So let's dive into. Let's go Oregon, James Madison. Early indications. I lean Oregon in this one. Oregon's an 11-1 team from the Big Ten. Good. They've got a couple quality wins on the year too. I don't want to give a score prediction, but I think this is going to be a 3 or 4 touchdown game. What do you think, Sweets?
Yeah, Oregon's favored by 21, and I think they've got it covered by halftime. I really do. You listen. I give James Madison credit. They did what they had to do for the committee to vote them in, but make no mistake, they don't have a chance against Oregon. I know that we've had some stinkers for picks. Trust me, James Madison's not winning this game. They're going to get blown out here. I'm gonna go. I'll give a score. I'm gonna go Oregon 52, James Madison 14. There's my prediction. Kev.
I just think it's going to end up whatever Oregon wants it to end up. Um, you're right. Oregon will have it covered by halftime. The question is, will they play their third string in the second half to, not have any injuries, and James Madison get a score late to backdoor cover it? And I don't think they'll backdoor cover it, but I could just see Oregon, going to their bench and playing them a lot. I just I don't see anywhere that James Madison will match up in this game. Oregon's good. They're physical. They proved against Iowa and USC that they're a physical type team and that they can play. And so where does James Madison do anything in this game? So I'm going to go Oregon 45-10. It's just won't even be worth watching.
And then,
this will be like burnt popcorn. That game is like burnt popcorn. Awful.
Next game is going to be Alabama, Oklahoma. I think it's tough to beat anybody twice in the same season. Oklahoma's offense has really struggled since Mateer's been injured, and then coming back from injury. We've seen the talent that this Alabama offense has. Ty Simpson was great for 10 weeks out of the season. I think he finds a little bit of that magic again in the playoffs. I think Alabama wins this game at Oklahoma. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, so my initial pick would be Alabama to win this game. But if I go a little deeper, and it still would probably be Alabama to win this game. But you mentioned Ty Simpson. So I would say I would go for the first 8 games of the season. I thought he was really good. But, he was a Heisman, and for a minute there, he was the front runner after that Georgia game for a few weeks. I don't know what, it, there was a point there, and it was maybe that the game before they played LSU. Maybe it was that the LSU game. You really started to see him start pressing, putting a lot of pressure on himself, and he even talked about it in the media about how he has to execute better. He was putting a lot of pressure on himself to really play very well. And when I say that, the only game I think he played well over the last four was the Auburn game. He was solid, and he led them on that fourth quarter drive to win the game there. But he had some mistakes even in that Auburn game. And so to me, he's not the same guy that he was. And I think his confidence has taken a hit. I think he's been pressing. I think Alabama would be who I would pick to win this game. But I'm also going to say this. If Simpson does not relax and just play and let the game come to him, do we see another offensive performance like they had against Georgia? And Sweet, you were right earlier. That's Glenn Schumann's maybe the best game that he's coached in 2 or 3 years since 22 at Georgia. Because to me, his luster had kind of taken a little bit of shine came off of that, but he shined it back up this past Saturday. Going back to Bama and Oklahoma, though, Oklahoma has a chance defensively to do the same thing to Alabama that with their front seven that Georgia did. And so again, I guess the more that I think about it and where Simpson's playing, and the one thing that Oklahoma can do is they can play field position, they can play defense, and they can kick field goals. And I think this will be a low-scoring game. I could even see this being much like the LSU-Oklahoma game, 17-13, 13-10. I guess right now, and I changed my mind here right now. I'm going to go Oklahoma in a very low-scoring game, just because I don't know if Simpson can get up off the mat. He's struggling. Sweet, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, just if you just say Oklahoma, Alabama, my first thought is Alabama. But I'm going to pick Oklahoma, and I'm going to tell you why. I think that Mateer, with a few weeks off where he's legitimately resting, he's not going to be taking the hits and stuff. I think you're going to see a little bit different John Mateer against Alabama than you did the first time. I think he's going to be a little more mobile. I think he's going to play a lot better, and I think Oklahoma's going to win the game. You said that they kick a lot of field goals. That kid, he does. Give me Oklahoma. They're going to score 2 touchdowns and kick 3 field goals, so that's 23, and Alabama's going to score 14. 23-14 Oklahoma.
That would be similar to the first game. And again, going back to Simpson in this, if he doesn't play well, that Bama running game it's a zero. It's a goose egg. So he has to play.
Yeah.
So that brings us to Ole Miss, Tulane. Kind of similar to the Oregon game. This I think is a 16.5-point line right now. I'm not worried about the wheels falling off for Ole Miss in this game. I've seen a lot of the Pete Golding videos, press conferences, him in the basketball arena. I don't want to predict what happens to him next year by any means, but I think they're locked in this game. You get your entire offensive staff coming back to coach. So shout out to LSU for doing that. But yeah, I think Ole Miss. What was the score? It was a 25-point game.
I think it was 42-10 the first time. No, they absolutely dominated them that first time.
Yeah, that's right. I think 30 plus. I honestly see it going pretty similar. The people in Oxford are going to be super excited about hosting a home playoff game, as they should be. By far the biggest sporting event to happen in the state of Mississippi ever, in my opinion. So I think Ole Miss is going to roll. Similar to James Madison. Shout out to Tulane for getting here, but in a couple weeks it's all over for them. What are your thoughts, Kevin?
I think Ole Miss wins this game. I will say this though, Tulane is played really well the last month of the season. They lost to Texas San Antonio, and at that point, I think everybody, pretty much didn't think that they would even play in their conference championship because they had to go on the road to Memphis and win a game there to even, to get to the point to be in consideration for that conference championship game. And they dominated Memphis and then got to the championship game. And then they really dominated North Texas. It ended up being a 13, 14-point game, but that was a 20-plus point game. So I think Summerall has Tulane playing their best football right now. That being said, I think Ole Miss wins. I just don't know that I'm going to go with a cover in this. I do think it'll be like 35-20. So I think they'll win, and it'll be, overall convincing. But I think this game for the first half, you could see some competitiveness in it. And it could be 7-8 point game at halftime, I think, maybe 10. But I think Ole Miss wins. But I would, if I had to take the bet, I would pick Tulane to cover this game. Sweets, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I like Ole Miss big here. I think that the whole coaching thing. I think it's kind of galvanized the players, and I think you're going to see that in this opening game. I think they're going to win. I think they're going to cover. I'm going to take them.
Up and there we go. He is cut off, but he was going to take Ole Miss big. I know that. So we will roll over to Texas A&M and Miami here. Probably the most exciting matchup in the playoff. I'm going to go ahead and real quick pull up the line in this one here. And let me see what they have it at. So Texas A&M, as of now, is a 3.5 point favorite. If Miami plays as good as they can, I think Miami is one of the best teams in this country. A&M has, looked good for most of the season. I'm going to, without diving into the numbers too deeply tonight, because we'll do that down the road, I'm going to lean on who I would rather as my quarterback in this game as far as who wins. And, it's not even close. I would take Marcel Reed every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So I think A&M wins this game. I do think, it's probably in like that 6 to 10 point win for Texas A&M. I think playing at home at Kyle Field is a huge advantage for them. 100,000 plus screaming Aggies. While it may be annoying most of the time, I think it's going to be in their favor in this one. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, this is the game I'm looking forward to the most, just simply because I think A&M got a little fatigued at the end of the season. Played a close game against South Carolina and had to put a lot of motion into that game to come back and win. And then went on the road last game of the season against Texas. And Texas was playing really good at that time. And I just think A&M was fatigued. But like we were saying earlier, there's no shame in that loss. You're losing to a good team on the road in a game that was competitive going into the fourth quarter, and either team could have won it. I really like A&M in this game. I think, getting a couple weeks off, getting some rest in this game is going to mean a lot to them. Miami's playing better, and I like the Reuben Bain, him going against A&M's line, and I do like the early chatter where A&M's line's basically saying he's not going to be anything to worry about in those aspects of things. I'm in total agreement with you here. I trust Marcel Reed more than I trust Carson Beck, just from a playmaking standpoint. And then the best playmaker on the field in this game is by far, in my opinion, your guy that you've been on all year, Casey Concepcion for A&M. I think we'll see big plays from him, special teams and wide receiver. And watching him in person this year, the only wide receiver to me, not to me, statistically proven it, the only wide receiver this year that was able to go in and effectively impact LSU with that LSU secondary was Concepcion. So I think he's going to have a big game in this game, and I think it'll be entertaining. And I'm going to go with A&M 30-20 over Miami, and a fun game to watch.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be the most exciting game Saturday, December 20th. And the tough part is it's the 11 a.m. game. You've got Oregon at 6:30, Tulane, Ole Miss at 2:30. Like you're playing the best first round game at 11 a.m. on a Saturday.
Isn't that a waste?
Yeah. At least even Bama, Oklahoma got the Friday night slot, which is going to be a good one. A great time slot to have, I think. All by yourself that day. Um, let's see. I was waiting to see if Sweets was going to be able to rejoin for Texas A&M Miami because I want to hear his thoughts on it. I know he's been high on Marcel Reed all year, but also overall high on this Miami team too. So we'll jump ahead to the Oregon Texas Tech. Oh nope, Sweets is back. Sweets, we've been saving this Miami Texas A&M game for you.
Miami, Texas A&M. I think this is going to be a really good game. I think they're pretty evenly matched. I think that if Miami plays like they did early in the year, I think Miami can beat Texas A&M, and it would be the most A&M thing ever to get to the playoff and then lose a home game in the first round of the playoffs. So I'm going to go ahead and go that route. I'm going to take Miami. I'm going to say that Carson Beck throws for 3 touchdowns. He does throw 1 pick because he's Carson Beck, and that Ruben Bain goes for 13 tackles, maybe a couple sacks, a forced fumble, and has a huge game. Give me the Canes 23, A&M 17.
Oh, big Miami upset at Kyle Field for you there. Oh, let's move.
That'd make it a fun weekend.
Yeah, that would be a way to kick off an 11 a.m. Saturday game with a Texas A&M loss. Yeah, so let's go to the quarterfinals. Let's go Oregon, Texas Tech. Sweets, I'm gonna let you get us started on this one here.
All right, yeah. So Texas Tech is getting a bye in the first round, and they're, in my opinion, they are the weakest of the teams that are getting a bye. They had a great season. Kudos for them for playing, doing what they had to do, winning the Big 12. But I think that Oregon gets them. I think that Oregon has a little bit more talent. I like Lanning as a coach. He's starting to come into his own a little bit more as a coach. He's starting to fill things out a little bit. I think that Oregon goes in and gets an upset here. I'm going to take Oregon 31, Texas Tech 24. DMAC?
Yeah, I like your prediction, but I like it the other way. I'm rolling Texas Tech here. Cameron Dickey, he's been a great young running back all year for him. I do think the best player on the field in this game is the senior linebacker, Jacob Rodriguez for Texas Tech. He's a dog. Really, he got snubbed by not getting invited to the Heisman ceremony upcoming. So, I hate that for him. But I think he's the best defender in the country from maybe not an NFL longevity conversation for what he's done this year in college football. So I'm rolling Texas Tech to get the win here. I think Oregon's a great team. I think Oregon's going to be even better next year potentially. Yeah, I'm rolling Texas Tech here. What do you think, Kevin?
What's your score, DMAC?
Exactly what you said, but the other way.
31-24. I like it.
This is the toughest game to me to pick in this whole bracket. because to me, there's still so much unknown about Tech. There's no doubt Texas is a good team. You can't question Texas Tech being a good team. They are. But that conference they play in is so bad. BYU is a good team out of that conference, and Utah is a solid team out of that conference. But I think if you put BYU or Utah in the SEC, they would be 8-4 at the best, and most likely both teams would be 7-5. So it makes it hard. And then I say that even though the league is bad, Tech dominated everybody except for that road loss at Arizona State. So it's a tough game for me to pick because it's hard for me to say how totally good Tech is. I like Lanning in this type of game. I don't like Lanning once you get to the semifinals or the national championship if he makes it that far. But I like him, in this matchup when you're in the quarters. So I think it'll be close. I think it'll be hard fought, and I honestly think it'll be low scoring for today's college football. Okay, so let me paraphrase that a little bit. Give me Oregon 24-20 over Tech in a game that I have zero confidence in my pick. Let me say that. I got to pick somebody, but
So this next game, we were split. I had Alabama moving on, but we're just going to say Oklahoma moves on and faces Indiana because I think even if I put Bama in there, I'm rolling Indiana in here. I've been a critic of Kurt Cignetti pretty much all season. Man, that may have been, one of the most complete games I've seen a team play from a physicality standpoint, from an execution standpoint. I know Mendoza didn't have the greatest game, but I gained a lot of respect for him in that game, similar to when LSU and UCF played in the Fiesta Bowl and Joe kept getting hit and getting right back up. I think it was a clean shot at the beginning of the game when Mendoza got hit and went down for a second. One play later, he's right there, back in, ready to go. So, what a fighter. I just don't think either of these teams, as good as Oklahoma's defense is, can match the physicality that Indiana brings. So I like Indiana. I think, if it's Oklahoma, it's maybe a little bit closer of a game just because of how good Oklahoma's defense is. But I don't see Indiana losing to either the 8 or the 9 seed. What do you think, Sweets?
Yeah, Indiana showed me what they are this weekend, and that's a hell of a tough football team, physical. They can outscore you, or they can beat you in the mud. They can win a close, low scoring game. They've done it all this year. Oklahoma's defense could give them trouble now. I'm not sure that they've faced any defense that's any better than Oklahoma's. They probably haven't faced anybody better. They may have faced somebody equal to, but they haven't faced anybody better than Oklahoma's defense. So that's going to be an interesting matchup if Oklahoma's the matchup. And that was my pick. So that's what I'm going off of. But go ahead and give me Indiana. I think Indiana wins the game. I'm going to take them 27-17. I just don't think Oklahoma can score enough to beat them. Kev?
Yeah, again, you got Indiana, a team that's playing really well on both sides of the football, very physical, does not make mistakes, going against an Oklahoma team. If they win, and we predicted them to that I think has been the most fortunate team in these college playoffs. That yardage-wise, Tennessee outgained them, Alabama outgained them, and they won both those games. And LSU was up in the fourth quarter on them and gave up a big play. So I think Oklahoma's the most fortunate team. I don't see them scoring more than 13 points in this game. I like Indiana 27, Oklahoma 13. And if, let's say if they, you flip it and put Alabama in because it is a close one, I think similar score, maybe 30-13 if Bama's in. I just think, one's a complete team, and that's Indiana. These other two teams have got flaws in them, in my opinion. So Indiana will win this one. And if this ends up being Indiana, and let's say 6.5, everybody needs to run, place their bet.
Yeah, no, I agree. So that brings us to Georgia, Ole Miss. Sweets, I'm gonna let you get us started here.
Yeah, this is where the rubber meets the road for the Rebs and their playoff run. I think Georgia beat them, pretty handily. I think what was that score earlier in the year? Let me double check that.
Like 44
In any
35.
case, what was it?
And I may be a little off. It was like 44-35, and Ole Miss was ahead in the fourth quarter, right at the beginning. Georgia scored the last 17 to win the game.
That's right. Yeah, I think that Georgia's a better team. I think with the coaching shakeup, while I think it's not going to be enough to affect them against Tulane, I do think not having Kiffin there against Georgia will be a detriment to them. Like I say, I think Georgia's defense is hitting on all cylinders right now, and Stockton's just playing a nice level kind of ball. He's not doing too much. He's not trying to bite off more than he can chew. Give me Georgia against Ole Miss if that's the matchup, and I'll take Georgia. I'll go 41-27. D-Mac?
Yeah, Georgia's playing really good football. Gunnar Stockton, that offense is clicking. Defense has really stepped up here of late. Man, don't count out the Rebels when they get to the quarterfinals here. Pete Golding's got this team bought in for the playoff. They've got Charlie Weiss Jr. over there calling plays. They lost an 8-point game at Georgia in Athens between the hedges. This is a neutral site game in the quarterfinals. I'm rolling Ole Miss. They get at least to the semifinals in this little bit of a dream scenario of making the college football playoff. I think Trinidad has a big game. I think it's going to be close. I see both defenses making big plays at certain times, but I think Ole Miss just does enough to get the win here. I'm going to go 27-24. Ole Miss wins and a little bit of a low scoring contest compared to last time they squared off. Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm going way opposite on that one. I think this is where, kind of like what Sweet said, I think this is where the rubber meets the road. I'm just going to say what I believe here. I think in this matchup, when you're talking Kirby against Golding, I think the mismatch is like way big. And I think, Ole Miss was competitive in this first game simply because Lane was on the sidelines and he schemed very well. I think they scored on their first 7 possessions. There's no way that happens against Georgia in a rematch with the adjustments that Kirby makes. I think, Georgia will jump out on them. And then I think, that's where the Ole Miss players are saying a lot of things now, and they're all bodying in and all this. That's emotion. You get hit in the mouth in a game that means something, the emotion goes out, and now you got to focus and you got to execute play after play. I think Georgia will have Ole Miss in a lot of doubt by halftime of this game. And then the second half, I think they wear them out. I think Georgia wins this game along the lines of 42-17. And I think Ole Miss's season comes to a crashing halt right here. And then by crashing, I mean I think they'll be soundly defeated.
So that brings us to Ohio State, and you guys both took Miami, right?
No, I took A&M. I took Aggie.
Okay. I'm going to stick with A&M. Sweets. We'll let you get started with Ohio State, Miami here.
Yeah, so Ohio State, Miami, quarterfinal matchup here. Be played in Columbus, and or that is a Columbus game, right? That will be a home game. That won't be a bowl game, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, they handle Miami here. Mid late December, it's going to be probably pretty cold up there, maybe a little snow. Miami boys aren't big on that stuff. I think Ohio State's the better team here. Miami's got a good defense; they can punch them in the mouth, but I think overall Ohio State's just a little too much for the Canes. Give me Ohio State 27, Miami 17. Kev?
Like much like A&M and Miami was my favorite matchup in the first round. My favorite matchup in the quarterfinals is this A&M Ohio State game. And again, I really want to see how Marcel Reed plays in this game. Um, I think, I think he's a talented guy, and obviously he didn't play well against Texas, but I think, this would be interesting to see in the playoffs if he relaxes and step back into himself and we see what he does. I, and then, again, Ohio State, when you look at who they've played this year, to me, their competition's not been that well. So I think Ohio State's a good team. I think they may still be the best team in the country, but I think this is going to be just an absolutely entertaining dogfight of a game that both teams will have chances to win in the fourth quarter, and I think with 7-8 minutes to go, that both teams will have the ball, and whoever scores in that moment will have a chance to win this game. I'm going to take Ohio State, but again, I really like A&M's chances for an upset here. So I'm going to take Ohio State, 24-20. But again, this will be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, so I'm this game is actually played in Arlington, the Cotton Bowl. I think there's going to be a lot of Aggie fans in attendance for this one. Um, we saw, as far as explosive plays go in the Big Ten championship, Mendoza had some nice passes downfield. You look at this A&M receiving core. You've got Casey Concepcion, who I think is going to be a difference maker in all the playoff games he plays in. But you've got Ashton Bethel Roman. You've got Mario Craver. Two other guys who can make plays. But I think Casey Concepcion is going to make enough plays downfield to attack this Ohio State defense. As good as Caleb Downs has been all year, he struggled in coverage a lot against Indiana last week. So I'm going to go A&M in another close one. I'm going to go 27-21. A&M wins and moves on to the semifinals. So that brings us to let's see. I took Texas Tech, so I'll go first in this Texas Tech Indiana game. And then let you guys go Oregon, Indiana. I think this is going to be a good game, really close. I think Texas Tech, they haven't played anybody like Indiana, but I think their core, they play physical football too. Love their defense, love their offense. I think for probably 3.5 quarters, this game's going to feel pretty even. I think when you get down to the last 7 or 8 minutes of this game, Indiana scores late and probably scores again. I think Indiana wins this game. I'm going to go 34-24. And they're just too physical for this Texas Tech team this year. I will say if Oregon was the matchup I was predicting, I would probably be pretty close to the same score. I see Texas Tech and Oregon as similar teams, but I just think Indiana's too physical. So, what are your thoughts on Oregon, Indiana, Kevin?
Yeah, I would just echo exactly what you said there, and I like Indiana in this matchup. Just again, I just think they're the better overall team. There's no weaknesses on this team, and again, they're the best coach team in college football, in my opinion. They may not win this whole thing, but in my opinion, they're the best coach team. So I would go Indiana. I think it'll be something like a 24-13 type game. Their defense is really good, and I think they'll contain Tech's offense and score, just enough. It'll be a methodical game. Their offensive line will control it. They'll run the ball, and their defense will be dominant like they have been. Sweet, your thoughts?
Yeah, so when Indiana went to Oregon earlier in the year and beat them, that was, that I thought that was, and I still think that was one of the biggest wins of the season. Um, that being said, Oregon has came back. They've handled their business to, well enough to be the number 5 seed in the playoffs. So they've done what they're supposed to do. They can actually beat Indiana. I don't think they do, but I see this being a very, very close game. I think Oregon's got a lot of talent. They may have more talent than Indiana, actually. I think they do. But I think that Indiana, like you said, Kev, they're the best coach team in the country. Signetti's done a hell of a job, and those kids believe. After they beat Ohio State Saturday night, they'd play the 86 Bears right now and think they could beat them. They're that confident in themselves, and I love that about them. I'm going to go ahead and take Indiana in a close one, 27-24. Don't be surprised if Oregon bites them, though. D-Mac?
Yeah, so that brings us to the other semifinal game. Since I have two completely different teams than you guys, I'll go Ole Miss and Texas A&M first. Go ahead and get that out of the way for you guys. I think this game is where the rubber meets the road a little bit for Ole Miss. I don't think their secondary is good enough to cover the three-headed monster at Texas A&M in the wide receiver room. Marcel Reed and those wide receivers are really going to be able to feast a little bit in this game. I think A&M wins this one. I'm going to go 38-24. Two touchdown victory to advance to the national championship game, and it is wild for me to say Texas A&M to a national championship, but I'm going to say it here tonight. That may change as we close in and really break down these games in the weeks to come. But yeah, give me A&M and Indiana in the national championship for now. So that rolls over to Ohio State and Georgia. Kevin, get us started on that one.
Yeah, so this will be a really good game, and I think I think Georgia should be ranked too. I think Georgia's playing really well, and you saw this start 3 or 4 games ago, to where they started playing really good on the ball. I will tell you the game in my mind where it started was at Mississippi State. They totally dominated that game, and since then they've been playing. They've been on a roll, and they dominated Texas, and again Texas played well down the stretch. So I said all that to say this: they're not making mistakes. Their scheme has been really good on defense and offense. Their line is blocking well enough for them to get a little bit of a running game going. It's not a typical running game where you have one running back that's leading it. It's a running back by committee, and it's also Gunnar Stockton. Um, they're getting yards with all of that because you might have their running backs average 3.5, and then Stockton has 4 or 5 runs where he averages 7 a carry. So it's very diverse in how they're getting their rushing yards, but they are. And then Stockton is the leader, and he's getting them, to get points. Said a lot there to say I think Georgia wins this football game 24-17, and you get an Indiana Georgia national championship, in my opinion, in that game. Sweets, what's your thoughts on Georgia Ohio State?
Yeah, like I said before, I think Georgia's playing as good as anybody in the country right now. That defense is humming. The offense is they're not lights out. They're not all world, but they're getting it done. And with that defense, this kind of reminds me of the 22 Bulldog team when they won it for the first time. Bennett's triple redshirt junior year or whatever it was, his 7th, 8th year in college. I think that I think that Georgia is going to win this game because of their defense. I'm going to take Georgia. I'm going to take Georgia 24-17. I like that. Georgia 24-17. And like I said, they're hitting on all cylinders right now. They're really playing as good as anybody, even Indiana. D-Mac?
Yeah, that brings us to the national championship game. I've got Indiana A&M. You guys have Indiana Georgia. So I will make my rapid prediction on Indiana Texas A&M first. Yeah, Indiana plays really physical football, but when it comes to building guys who are physical, nobody does it better than Tommy Moffitt at Texas A&M. I think A&M will be able to match the physicality in this game, and I love the way the offensive line has played for a majority of the year at Texas A&M. I think they're going to give Marcel Reed time to throw. And man, I just can't go against KC Concepcion. Um, I'm rolling a close, somewhat low scoring victory for the Aggies. 21-17. Texas A&M gets it done. The SEC wins a title, and yeah, that's it. So now we got Indiana, Georgia, Sweets. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like your call. The SEC wins a title, but it's the pups. It's the pups that win this one. I think Georgia. I think Georgia is as physical as Indiana. I think Georgia is more talented than Indiana. I don't know that they're as well coached as Indiana, but it's hard to say that being that Kirby Smart's won 2 national championships, but Signetti's really got things rolling at Indiana, so it's tough to say anybody's coaching better than him right now. But yeah, I think that Georgia just has a little too much for Indiana. Give me Georgia 27, Indiana 21, and my little princess is a happy camper. Kev.
Yeah, I mean, man, it's a tough game to pick for me. Uh, Again, I'm going with a team where I'm looking at the team that I think is the best coach team against probably the second best coach team in this matchup, and the team that I think is just if you look at process execution, that's Indiana. If you look at the team that makes the best adjustments and as a staff that might make the best scheme adjustments going into a game, that's Georgia. I mean, one thing that we've talked a lot about, over the last couple of days in these weekend games that we didn't mention. We mentioned, Georgia's defense, but how about, and I mentioned their running game, but how about Georgia utilizing Dylan Bell to get their running game going? They schemed some things for him, and that really, to me, opened it up for them to get the lead in that first half. So you've got the best coached execution team against the best, uh, changes and schematics and things like that to offset some things and adjustments. And so it's a hell of a game right here. I think you've got Indiana and Georgia both, have quarterbacks that are leaders. Stockton is obviously a leader for Georgia, and Mendoza's been a leader for Indiana. When I go back to that Penn State game, and now he led them from behind, and then again gutting out a win against Ohio State. So you like that about them, and then both coaches coached under Saban for a little while at Alabama, and both of these guys are tough guys that are going to grit it out. The press conference in this game would be great if you end up with these two teams because those coaches will stand up and say what they believe in, and they're both confident. Said all that to say, look, guys, before the game, I'll probably pick Georgia, but I like this Indiana team, and they just find ways to win. Um, they're not the most talented team, but when you go down the matchups and how I think this thing will play out, um, they just don't make mistakes either in the moment. I think they're the most secure team when it comes to not making a mistake. So I think this will be a hard fought game, kind of low scoring. Give me Indiana in this game, 23-17, and it's no longer Bobby Knight and a basketball school. It's Kurt Signetti and an Indiana national championship.
Nice. So that that'll bring us to our last segment of the night, the conference by conference winners and losers. Let's start in the ACC. I'll give my winner first. I've got Duke as the winners in this conference. Wasn't always pretty for them, but at the end of the day, they won the ACC championship. So they are the ACC winners by default. Not really default. They earned that win against Virginia, but shout out to Duke. Kevin, who do you have as your winner in this league?
So I still like Georgia Tech as my overall winner in this league because I just look at the progression that they've made since Brent Key's been their coach. When he took that job, they were coming off of a 1-11 season, and they'd only won like 3 games over the last two years before he took the job. And he's taken them progressively better and finishing 9-3 this year, and very, very close to 10-2. So the trajectory of that program is much higher than what it's done, and I give him the credit for that. So I'm just looking at the overall where a team's at and how their trajectory is, and I really like Georgia Tech, and this was the wildest conference of all the 4 Power 4 conferences. You look at the top 5 teams in the conference that all had about 2 losses. One thing this conference has got to do, let me say this, they've got to fix their tiebreaker system. There's no reason that you have 10-2 teams and a team with 4 losses gets in their conference championship. They need to go, once you get down to a certain level, it's the highest ranked team, so that they don't end up. They were at a huge risk this year of having a team knocked out of the playoffs, and the committee, I think, gave them Miami to secure an ACC team in it. So they got to fix that in this conference. But I like Georgia Tech as my winner. Sweets, what about you?
My team is Miami. They're representing the conference in the playoffs. I think they are the best team in that conference, regardless of them not winning the conference championship. I think they're the most talented team, and Cristobal was able to do enough to get them in. Whether he can make something more of that here in the playoffs, we'll see. But I think Miami, I got to give them a nod as the best team in the conference this year and the team of the year. DMAC?
Yeah, over to losers. My loser in the ACC is the Syracuse Orange. After starting the season 3-1, starting quarterback Steve Angeli went down, and they lost 9 straight, and none of which were even remotely close. Their closest loss after going into week 5 was like a week 11 game against North Carolina, where they lost by 17. Notre Dame beat them 70-7. The wheels just really fell off of this program. A team that I thought was, probably going to be in that 8-4, 9-3 range this year. Wheels just really fell off for them, and they finished tie by numbers, but Boston College beat them head to head. So Syracuse finished dead last in the ACC. So they are my loser this year. Who's your loser, Sweets?
I'm gonna take Florida State. Florida State started off gangbusters. They beat playoff bound Alabama 31-17 in the opener. Scored like 400 against East Texas West State Community College or something the next week, and then scored like 70 again against Kent State the week after that. Then they face Virginia. They lose in overtime, so they're sitting there at 3-1. Then they lose a close one to Miami the next week. Lose another close one to Pitt. And then the wheels come off. Then they lose to Stanford. They beat Wake, but they lose to Clemson. They beat Virginia Tech and finish by losing to the Gators and NC State. after those first 3 wins where they scored like 200 points in their first 3 games and beat Alabama, you thought that they had something going there, but it was fool's gold. Yeah, very disappointing season for Florida State and Norville. I'm not sure how much longer that leash is down there. There are only, I don't know how many more coaches and staff members he can fire before they finally put the axe to his neck. So, Kev, what are your thoughts? Or DMAC?
Yeah. So go ahead.
No, I'm good. You're up, Kevin.
All right. So I'm going to go with the one that probably had the most noise this year, just because of the name. But again, I think that this was earned. My biggest loser in this conference would be the North Carolina Tar Heels. Now, I will say this: Belichick got that team to playing better in the last half of the season. But I just look at the total program. I think the total program, the brand took a hit in a big way, and so I think my biggest loser would be North Carolina, big with Bill Belichick, and then also the only person in this scenario that took a bigger hit was Jordan Hudson. So give me North Carolina and Jordan Hudson as the biggest losers in this conference.
So that brings us to the Big 12. My winner in this conference are the Texas Tech Red Raiders. They lost a game on the road against Arizona State where their starting quarterback was out. Outside of that game, their closest game was BYU during the season, in which they won by 22 points. They absolutely dominated everybody in the conference this season. So they had, I think 7 games of 30 plus victories. They beat Utah by 24 at Utah. So huge season for them. I think they expected to be good with what they put into the program, but they truly dominated all season. Kevin, who's your winner in this conference?
I'm going to go Utah just because I think Kyle Whittingham, last year they were favored to do so well, and then they had a disappointing season, and he got them back on track this year. So I'm going to go Kyle Whittingham. There were talks that he might retire, but he hasn't announced that yet if that's what he chooses to do. But he had them right in contention. Outside of Tech, if you take Tech and set them to the side, you had Utah, you had BYU, and Cincinnati, would be the next 3 teams. And he had Utah really playing and competing and doing some good things. So I say that again. I see this program back on the rise, and I see them contending next year in the Big 12. So I'm going to go Utah. I like what they did, getting themselves back in a good position to be one of the prominent teams in this conference. Sweets, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and give the nod to the BYU Cougars. They lost 2 games on the season, both to Texas Tech, and handled their business.
And we lost Sweets. He'll be back soon though. So we'll jump to our losers and we'll let him go back to BYU. My loser in this conference is the Colorado Buffaloes. 3-9 season, finished 15th in the Big 12. You look week 1, they lose to Georgia Tech 27-20 this season. We knew Georgia Tech was going to be a good team. So there was a little bit of hope. Week 2, they beat Delaware, and then things just got ugly. They did beat Wyoming, and they beat Iowa State, which is an impressive win. Iowa State was ranked at that point. But man, do they have some bad losses. Utah beat them 53-7. Arizona beat them 52-17. They lost to West Virginia. Just not a good season for Colorado. And, I would expect that Colorado is planning to, they were planning to be bowl eligible this year, and we're far from it in this one. So who's your biggest loser in the Big 12, Kevin?
Well, to me, there's no doubt in this one. It's one of the worst teams in college football, and I hate to say it. It's my alma mater. I got to go with Oklahoma State. Now, I say all that to say this: we had a hell of a run until the last 2 years, until Gundy decided he didn't want to participate in NIL and thought that he could just go old school and win at the old. I'm going to get culture and I'm just going to coach guys up. Really, just an absolute bad roster if you look at this Oklahoma State team this year. And it showed as they got it handed to them. You mentioned Colorado and bad losses. For Oklahoma State this year, it meant something just to be competitive in a game. And they were, against UCF. That was a game they had a shot at winning, but they let it get away. Look, they won one game all year, and that's against Tennessee Martin. And that game was close until about the fourth quarter. So by far, the losers in the Big 12 would be Oklahoma State, and they might be the losers for the year in the conference. Now, the one positive, and it's a huge positive, they hired Eric Morris from North Texas. I think we'll see a quick turnaround here with who he can bring in the portal. But loser, definitely Oklahoma State Cowboys. Sweets, what's your thoughts? Loser in the Big 12.
Oh, loser in the Big 12. Good Lord. There are a few teams that I could pick here. Let me see. Who was I looking at? Big 12. Sorry about that, guys. My loser in the Big 12. Who did you take, D-Mac?
I took the Colorado Buffaloes.
Yeah, the easy pick. I'm going to go ahead and go with Dave Aranda's Baylor squad. He finished 5-7. Is not going to get to a bowl game. They're not even bowl eligible. Had high hopes for him when he left LSU and went to Baylor. Had a great year that first year. Won conference. Did a great job, but hasn't done a ton there. We might be to the point where he's on the hot seat and Baylor starts looking in another direction. And if they did, I would love Dave Aranda on my defensive staff as a defensive coordinator or a linebacker guy or something. So that's my Big 12 loser. Where do we go next?
Yeah, we're going to go to the Big 10. I'm going to take a team that you guys probably aren't expecting as my winner. I'm not going to take Ohio State because I kind of feel like maybe they underperformed for what their fan base was expecting. So I'm going to go with the Iowa Hawkeyes here as my winner in the Big 10. They lost in week 2 to Iowa State. They finished the season 8-4, but their defense is always going to be good. What I loved about this team is they averaged game, which is something you have not seen from an Iowa Hawkeye offense in several years. So, they're much improved, even in their losses this year. I'm not a big fan of good losses, but for where they need to go, a 3-point loss on the road to Iowa State in week 2, a 5-point loss to Indiana, a 2-point loss to Oregon, and a 5-point loss to USC. That is 10, 12, 15 points decided their season this year. So, they were really close to being there. The offense turned things around. The defense was good again. So if I'm an Iowa Hawkeye fan, I feel good about where this team is moving in the future. Kevin, who's your winner in the Big 10?
Yeah, well, I've been since I was wrong in that Indiana-Illinois game. I've been on Indiana's bandwagon the rest of the year. So, to me, without a doubt, it's Indiana as the big winner. Again, teams with their trajectory rising, it's them. They've went in 2 years under Cignetti. They went from an also just a 500 team that occasionally might win 7 or 8 to one of the best teams in this conference the last 2 years. So to me, it's Indiana in a big way. They've established themselves at the top of that league and knocking some teams off. So big winner to me is Indiana. They have changed their brand.
So I'll go with my loser while we wait on Sweets to reconnect. My loser in this league is Penn State. Just not only from what they put out on the field, they finished 6-6 after starting 3-0. They lose six straight, and then they win the last three against teams who all finished with two or less wins. Scratch that, Nebraska was 4-5 in conference play. Yeah, from how they performed, they're a preseason potential national champion. Finished 6-6, fire their coach extremely early in the season and go months without, or I guess 2 months roughly, 60 plus days without filling that vacancy. So they had troubles on and off the field this season. So Penn State is my loser in this league. Kevin, who's your loser?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with a team that actually didn't have a bad record, but I just look at preseason where there was a lot of talk about them and how they might compete for this league, and they had a lot of returning players, including a quarterback that everybody spoke highly of, and that's Illinois. Illinois finished at 8-4. But they were 5-4 in the league, and many thought that this might be a year that they would have a 10-2 type team and finish in the top part of this league. And to me, they were, just a little above middle of the pack, and their conference record shows that. Like I said, they were 5-4 in the league. So definitely, to me, big disappointment for their fans, and kind of how Brett Belima has been over the last 10 years. He might get you to play better, but he does not get the teams to the level that he did at one time many years ago when he was with Wisconsin. So Illinois would be my disappointment this year in this league. Sweets, what's your winner and loser from the Big Ten?
Well, my I'll start with my loser. My loser is Wisconsin. We had talked offline about their NIL woes, but even with all that being said, Wisconsin's had a solid program for decades. Back in the pre-millennium with Barry Alvarez. That Fickle just hasn't been able to get anything going there, and I had really high hopes for him after the DC job that he had done. So Wisconsin's been a huge disappointment for me. As far as my team, it's tough to go against Indiana, Ohio State. But I'm gonna go ahead. I'll take Oregon. I'll go outside the box a little bit because I said that they could upset Indiana in the playoffs. So give me Oregon as my team, but we all know it's Indiana and everybody else over there.
So that brings
Where
us
we go
to
next?
that brings us to the SEC. I'll go with my winner, Texas A&M. Team I think we all kind of predicted that 7-5, 8-4, 9-3 realm. Most likely they'd be Texas 8-4 again, but 11-1 this season. Marcel Reed really stepped up. KC Concepcion was phenomenal for him. Colin Klein deserves all the credit in the world for the job he did as offensive coordinator. He'll be moving on to Kansas State here pretty soon. So Texas A&M is my winner in this league. 7-1 in conference play, 11-1 overall. Who is your winner in this league, Kevin?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with a team that hasn't really been a top team in this conference since the 1960s. They never played in the conference championship game, and the tiebreaker just didn't fall their way this year. They would have played in it this year. And they've never won 11 games in a regular season. So they had a lot of first. And then I think 30 wins over the last 3 years is where they're at. So again, a first there. So my winner in this program or in this one is Ole Miss. And again, I've taken teams that I think are rising with their trajectory. I think this team has risen. I will say in this scenario, I think there's going to be a fall because I don't know that you can go get it to any level. I don't even know that you can sustain it. No other coach has, in over 50 plus years since the 1960s. But give me Ole Miss as the big winner in this SEC. So then Sweets, I don't know. It looks like he's about to make it back if he's going to give us his winner from the SEC.
Yeah, I'm off cam for 1 second. My winner for the SEC, I'll go ahead and take the Georgia Bulldogs since I'm picking them to win the national title. Georgia was supposed to be a solid team at the beginning of the year, so it's not really a big surprise. However, the fact that they were able to lose to Alabama, their lone loss on the year, and then come back and totally dominate them the way that they did Saturday night in the championship game showed me a lot. So that's my winner. My loser, or DMAC, did you call your winner yet?
I did, yeah.
Okay. My loser is the fighting Bengal Tigers of Louisiana State University. 7-5 was not on anybody's bingo card this season, and it wasn't just going 7-5. It was the way that we did it, with an epically bad offense. I'd have never dreamed that, in Brian Kelly's 3.5 years here, that he could put up the worst special teams unit in the history of LSU football in year one, the worst defense a few years ago, and then the worst offense this year. So I guess that's something he could tip his cap about, because no LSU coach has ever been able to pull off that trifecta before. So that's my loser. Kev?
Yeah, so my loser in the SEC is hands down Florida, a team that has a very talented roster. It's going to be interesting when the NFL draft happens over the next 2 years, and I think you're going to see 15 to 20 with these guys on NFL rosters, and the best they could do is 3 wins this year. So relatively similar conference games as they had last year, and they went 8-4 going into the ball game. So tremendous difference in the outcomes and the results. So give me biggest loser Florida.
Yeah, so I'm changing it up a little bit here. I'm gonna change from my pre-show pick. I'm gonna go with the Auburn Tigers here as the biggest loser. Yeah, their defense was phenomenal all season. The offense, you've got head coach Hugh Freeze, who they fired during the season. He's an offensive-minded coach. They brought in Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma, which didn't pan out quite the way they expected it to. But there was no reason for this offense to be as bad as it was. Averaged about 26 points per game. When you've got Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton, Malcolm Simmons at wide receiver for your top 3, there's no reason that those guys only combined for 10 touchdowns in the receiving game. Cam Coleman was your leading receiver with 725 yards. You just can't have that if you're Auburn. 1-7 in the SEC. Their only win was a 9-point win over Arkansas. Now they did have a tough SEC schedule. At Oklahoma, at Texas A&M, Georgia, Missouri, Vandy, Alabama, but they lost a 10-3 game to Kentucky at home. So this was not a very good football team, and expectations were much higher with Hugh Freeze at the helm, and just did not pan out. So Auburn is my biggest loser in this league. My close second was Arkansas, but at the end of the day, Arkansas going 2-10 is not as surprising as Auburn going 5-7 in my opinion. So give me Auburn for my biggest loser. Sweets, before we wrap up, any final thoughts tonight?
Not much really. I'm just disappointed in the playoff committee. Had a chance to get it right and screwed it up again. I wish these, I mean, for lack of a better term, these DEI, shoe-ins like James Madison and Tulane, yeah, they just don't have any business being there. That's not a knock at those two schools. Listen, I think that they should have a group of 5 national championship and a Power 4 national championship. Because those guys, there's never going to be a group of 5 team that wins the college football playoff. It's just not going to happen. DMAC, you're turning red. Breathe.
Yeah,
Um,
man, that might be my favorite comment of
but
the year.
it's
The
just
DEI.
seriously, it's just for lack of a better term. I can't see how you can look at a few of the teams that were left out instead of Tulane and James Madison and say that they weren't better. And so yeah, it was a massive failure. But it's the NCAA, is what they do. Kevin.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go. We pick winners and losers, and so I'm going to go biggest winner this year for college football. I'm going to go the fan because I think we had a really fun season this year with a lot of ups and downs, with teams that played themselves into the playoffs and that kind of stuff, and how you had the playoffs went really down to the last week of the season and even into the conference championships. And you had teams like Texas and Vandy and Notre Dame that didn't get in that, most years would have gotten in and should be in. So I think the fans are the biggest winner in this. Overall, again, you had teams like Oklahoma that weren't predicted to be in this that are, and Ole Miss. So I think the fans won this one. But Sweets, I got to follow up with you too. If I'm going to go biggest loser, I'm going to go to the NCAA and that playoff committee. And my prediction from that would be, so we are, one athletic director that led that committee has already been fired, and I think the next one, what a bunch of idiots. And Yurachek, I think, will be gone shortly from Arkansas. He might make it to next football season, but by the next football season, he's gone. And again, this will truly be known as the worst committee ever. They might even do a 30 for 30 on ESPN on this group of idiots. So, I mean, go figure. They didn't even have a consistent way that they selected the teams. I mean, and it showed. We could talk about it for days. So, biggest winner, the fans. Biggest loser, the NCAA playoff committee. D-Mac, how do you finish it up?
Yeah, I'll go biggest winner for college football this year. I'm going to go transfer quarterbacks, not necessarily first year transfers, but you look at Diego Pavia, Fernando Mendoza, Trinidad Chambliss, and I know there's others that I'm leaving out. Man, what a great opportunity for those guys. As much as I complain, fans complain about man, the transfer portal, this and that, or the current state of college football. Great to see guys like that get to perform on a bigger stage. All 3 of those guys, I know 2 of which are invited to the Heisman ceremony. Man, just three great quarterbacks, three great individuals there, and there's many more to name. So shout out to the transfer quarterbacks who got the ball out this year. And then my biggest loser, I'm going to keep it with the NCAA here. The college football playoff committee, huge problem. But I think the current schedule of college football is also a big problem moving forward with coaching changes. I think if you expand the playoff, there's got to be some potential talk of moving the season up. Um, we could spend an entire episode just giving the NCAA ideas on how to improve what they do. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Everything is as good as college football is. the playoff committee, the current schedule of how the timeline of events work in college football is a mess and needs to be fixed on all sides there. So as we wrap up, we're gonna go live on our Thursday show this week too, guys. We're gonna go ahead and make the NCAA a big topic of discussion on Thursday, and I'm gonna bring a new game to you guys. We're gonna do a mascot fight challenge. We're gonna pick the Power Four conferences, which mascots would win in a fight. Do something a little fun this week. So that's a wrap for tonight. We'll see you guys back here on Thursday, and let's get ready for some bowl games and some college football playoffs. We'll see you guys soon.
Like, follow, subscribe.